Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I you're coming through nice and loud. I'm trying to find my script here so that I can sound less like I'm ad-libbing than I will be. Okay, great. So we'll wait for Nehemiah, but he's got 5 minutes, so he'll be here, I'm sure. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Well, could you tell me a little bit about yourself? All I know about you is that you were one of the artists who were there at the beginning, and that I guess you helped in the repainting. Tell me, who are you? Are you an artist by profession, or?
Yeah, I'm an artist and a writer. Writing usually pays the bills, but my art sells pretty well. I'm an activist, and I started doing reporting during all the protests and riots when they started happening after the peaceful marches back in, I can't remember what day it is, a few months ago. And so when I kind of had the idea I saw the murals pop up all over Tulsa, all over the country. And I was like, well, I would love to have one of those in Greenwood. And so I talked with another friend who had a similar idea, not in Greenwood. He was kind of hesitant to do it there, but I felt it was the most appropriate. And so we kind of got together, got a team together, raised funds for it. And then when we couldn't get permission from the city, we did it subversively and did it in the middle of the night and got it done within 7.5 hours.
That's remarkable. You saw. 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk, a Tulsa World virtual town hall meeting. I'm Wayne Greene, editorial pages editor of the Tulsa World. Today's town hall is graciously underwritten by the George Kaiser Family Foundation. Today we're going to be talking about the Black Lives Matter street art on Greenwood Avenue near Archer Street with Black Wall Street Times founder and editor Nehemiah Frank, who's a member of the Tulsa World Community Advisory Board, and one of the artists responsible for the Black Lives Matter painting, Briana Shea. Thank you to both of you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Our questions today come from our readers for the most part, and want to get to many of them as possible. So let's start with a quick recap of what got us to here. Earlier this summer, President Trump's re-election campaign announced that he would hold his first post-COVID election rally in Tulsa. This is a time of heightened racial tension nationwide because of the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The Tulsa location aggravated those concerns because the city was the site of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Initially, the rally was scheduled for June 19th, which is Juneteenth, further aggravating the situation. The Trump administration, or rather the Trump people, moved the rally to June 21st, but the city was already on edge, a situation that wasn't helped by Governor Kevin Stitt's suggestion that Trump would visit the Greenwood area site of the race massacre as part of the Tulsa visit. There were protests and speeches, and Tulsa's previously canceled Juneteenth celebration was reinvigorated. Before the Trump rally, activists painted the words "Black Lives Matter," a rallying motto for many concerned with the state of justice in America, on Greenwood Avenue in letters big enough to be read, I suspect, from Air Force One passing overhead. The street painting became a rally point for those opposed to the Trump rally and to the president in general, and it's quickly become an important emblem for many. Others have said that fair play requires that if one social or political message is allowed on a city street, any message has to be similarly tolerated, including things that are relatively outrageous, messages from groups like Westboro Baptist Church or other fringe organizations. Others, including the Tulsa Arts Commission, have said the Black Lives Matter painting is unique and needs to be preserved as public art and an act of civil disobedience. The art was vandalized with blue paint and restored, and now it remains in place, but potentially threatened for removal by the city, although there are also city efforts to try to preserve it without creating a public forum for others. That's a lot of background. Briana Shea, you were in on the street art early. I wonder if you could just tell us how it came about from your perspective.
Well, myself, like many others, we wanted to do something that other cities were doing around the nation, which was paint our own mural. And Tulsa holds such a significance because of the unique history of the massacre of 1921. And so when it came time to pull the community together and have a vote of, where we think it should be, we ended up in historic Black Wall Street. We reached out to the city asking for permission or how to go about getting the proper permits, what permit we would actually need, and all of our requests fell on deaf ears. And so we decided as a community and as a group, we started a Facebook page about it to go ahead and do it subversively in the middle of the night to get it birthed by the time of Juneteenth celebration started the very next day. So we started at 11 p.m. the night before, and we finished just after 7 a.m. on Juneteenth.
So Nehemiah Frank, I wonder if you could tell us why you think the Black Lives Matter painting has become sort of a rallying point for many people, and why do you think it should be preserved?
There's a lot of reasons why I think it should be preserved. First of all, it looks extremely beautiful on Greenwood Avenue, which is such a historic street for the city, but not only for the city and for Black America, but for America in general. The Greenwood story is a part of the American story. And what happened to Greenwood in 1921 is a direct result that people didn't believe that Black lives mattered. And so there are tons of reasons I can think, and I'm pretty sure that Briana, as well as many others who watch this, can think of reasons why that mural should in fact stay on the historic Greenwood Avenue.
So one of the reasons that some have suggested it needs to be removed is that if the city allows it to stay, they might be creating a public forum so that anyone with a can of paint could paint a message on a street anywhere in the city. Do you think that the Black Lives Matter, there's something unique about this art that would allow it to be preserved without creating that sort of a public forum?
Without a doubt. I mean, if you just think about where we are in American history, this is a movement. This is the civil rights movement of our generation. And it's stamped by Black Lives Matter murals all across the country, including that of our nation's capital.
Mm-hmm. So we asked our readers what questions they wanted to ask today, and a lot of people who responded seemed very concerned that the street art wasn't specifically permitted by the city in advance, and in their minds that makes it illegal, or as some put it, graffiti. What do you offer to people who look at it that way, Briana?
Well, I mean, like I said, we did try to go through the proper channels, and we just weren't getting the support or responses that we needed from our city councilman or from our mayor. And so we did do it subversively, but we're activists. That's what we do. We act. And, as the great saying is, it's easier to ask for forgiveness and permission, even though we tried to ask permission and we were denied. So, I mean, again, we did what we thought was right in the right time before Juneteenth, before Trump coming to Tulsa. And because of the movement and the history and the significance of that specific area that it was done in, I mean, I think the aesthetics and the culture of that community, it was well worth it. I mean, it's a perfect home for Black Lives Matter.
And I think it's, and if I could just chime in as well, to what Briana is saying, is Briana and all of the artists who helped put that mural, that street mural together, and it is in fact a street mural, it is art, is that what they were demonstrating is what John Lewis would call good trouble. And that's something that's how it should be looked at upon, is they made good trouble. They practiced civil disobedience. And of course it's breaking the law. That's the point of it, because they tried going through the proper channels, but the proper channels didn't allow for their voice to come to the forefront or to even be taken serious.
I understand what you're saying, but I want to dig into it in the name of people who are sending us these questions just a little bit deeper, Briana. If you concede that this was done outside of the legal structure, it was essentially illegal, why should it have any protection? Why shouldn't the city just come out and erase it? What's different between this and graffiti?
Well, this was done this wasn't a solo person doing it. Its community members came from all different communities. We had people from the LGBTQ plus community, the Hispanic community, the indigenous community, Black community, white community. All of these people came together in the middle of the night, stayed up all night to birth this thing that we thought was equal and fair for our community. With the significance of the area, with the significance of the history of Tulsa, I mean, it wasn't just one person acting for someone else. It's an entire community coming together.
I suppose that we could point out that at least in 1921, and it didn't end there, the city of Tulsa wasn't there to protect the rights of the city's Black community. And if people are acting outside of the law, you can certainly sort of date it from that sort of situation. Nehemiah, Martin Luther King Jr. is an official, authentic American national hero. We celebrate his birth as the national holiday. But civil disobedience was one of his basic means of shaming American society into change. Does it give you any pause to defend the Black Lives Matter street painting because of the way it was created?
I mean, I don't think so at all. I think that the nation was birthed on civil disobedience, if we can think of it that way. And I'm not saying that we need to birth the new nation just because of a street mural, but I think that many Tulsans are making this a bigger deal than it really needs to be, especially since it's in Greenwood. Had this been 50 years ago, no one would really even give a damn about what was going on that street because Jim Crow would have been enacted.
Yeah, that's interesting. So several of the people who emailed me in advance of this forum seem to be conflating the words Black Lives Matter, the words on the street, with the Black Lives Matter movement that a lot of people of varying perspective are involved in, and then some specific organizations that have Black Lives Matter as part of their name and that they've heard about on cable television or read about online. Briana, in your mind, are there differences between all those things?
I don't think so. I think it's, the whole stance behind Black Lives Matter organization is to call to action the state-sanctioned violence of African Americans in the Black community. And this is to bring light to that and to finally get these justice for these crimes against Black men, women, and children. And the whole thing about Black Lives Matter is not saying that every other life doesn't matter. It's that Black lives are being taken at an alarming rate, and that needs to be put in the spotlight, and action does need to be taken. Even after George Floyd, there's still Black men being shot by police officers. We're still having those deaths, even though we're in the biggest civil rights movement in history, and yet these actions are still being done.
Nehemiah, what's your take on this? Can somebody believe that Black Lives Matter and support the street art here in Tulsa, but not necessarily buy into everything, every idea that's associated with Black Lives Matter that you might hear about on Fox News or a website?
I don't quite understand the latter part of the question. But what I will say is that Black Lives Matter, it's more than just Black men getting shot or Black women getting shot or Black people being disproportionately incarcerated or Black children failing in schools because the system is against them, or Black people disproportionately dying of COVID-19. The list goes on. Why Black lives should matter, why we scream Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. It's an endless list of wrongs that the American government and the culture itself has negatively targeted on African Americans.
Briana, were you trying to say something?
Just like if you believe in any sort of thing, like religion, politics, or whatever, just because, all Democrats tend to put in this category of like they want abortions or they want this or they want that, just because you're you're working with a movement or working with an organization doesn't mean you have to believe everything they stand for. That means you believe the bigger issue behind it, not all the nitty gritty that's involved in it. I mean, you can still, be a Democrat or be a Republican and believe something different than what tends to be the normal in that category. So no, I don't, it's all tied into one. I just think the message and the movement behind it is what's most important.
Right.
So what I'm hearing, I think both of you say, is that it's a diverse way of thinking that coalesces around the crying need for justice reform, for equality in our society, and within that tent, that big tent, there are perhaps a lot of ways thinking about various other issues. You're not all Democrats or Republicans or
Right.
or what have you. But what you unify on is exactly what the three words say: Black Lives Matter.
That's right.
So here's a kind of a different take on the issue that I got from an emailer, and I'll just read this to you. In this age of symbolism, I'm surprised that the sponsors want a Black Lives Matter sign on an active roadway with cars driving over it. I understand why they put them in front of Trump Tower or the White House, but would think that the side of a building would be a more appropriate place in a lot of senses. So almost like you're disrespecting the words by putting it in a place where cars drive over it. Briana, I'm going to pose this to you. Is it a problem that this is out on the street with people driving on it? The vandalism incident makes it obvious that it may be hard to maintain over the long term.
Maintaining it will be a little difficult. I mean, but all we have to do is get a group together and go back out and repaint it. That's what happened when it was vandalized. I got a call that morning letting me know that, it had been vandalized. And so it was easy. All I did was share a photo of it, asked who came to help. And then we had 60 people come at 7 p.m. and help paint it. And I mean, I think it does belong on the street. Look at every other city that has a mural, it's on the street. You can't see Black Lives Matter on the side of a building from an airplane. You can't see it above. You can't look out your window and see the whole thing. And so, I mean, what more appropriate place to put it than the streets where all these Black men, women, and children were killed by white mobs?
Right. And then, to take that a little bit further, you get permission from a private business owner to be able to put a mural on the side of their building, right? If you're spray painting something on a wall of a private business, that's not the city, that's not the system, the government that needs to be challenged and needs to be examined and changed and transformed. So you disrupt the system by going against the order of how things are traditionally done.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that the fact that it was done without permission is actually essential to it. That's part
Absolutely.
of it.
That's part of it. And then here's another thing to think about too. Had we put Black Lives Matter on a building, it wouldn't get the same social media reaction or media reaction period. So that message goes a lot further because it is disruptive, beautifully disruptive.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I like that. That's so good of your mind.
Okay. So another reader wrote that she thinks it's important for the art to remain in place up until and through the upcoming 100th anniversary of the race massacre. Has it become that emblematic, Nehemiah? Is this essentially going to be a permanent part of Tulsa?
I think that it will, and I think that it should be. And I'm happy to the people that put it there. I really appreciate them. And you look at the community appreciates it too, because we have accomplices. We have people that don't look like us, but that believe that our lives matter.
So as we wrap up, I want to give each of you a chance and we think about the conflict this is raising politically and the debates going on over at City Hall about what to do about the street art. I want to give each of you a chance to offer your opinion about what you think the road forward is from here. 3 months from now, do you expect Tulsa will still be debating the future of this street art? And let's start with you, Briana.
Absolutely, I do. Unfortunately, so I mean, just because of the different demographics that we have in Tulsa and different political views, it's as long as it's there, there's going to be debate about it. I mean, it's not going to stop, but that doesn't mean that, you know, every time someone wants to go vandalize, that we're not just going to go and fix it.
Yeah.
And it,
if the city came and sandblasted it tonight, I assume that the people who are committed to this would come back and put it back in place.
Oh, 100%.
Nehemiah, where do you see this going from here?
Well, 3 months from now, we will be voting for the next president of the United States. So we don't really know what's going to be happening in 3 months. Well, I would imagine if it's in November that there will be a lot of tension going around. But I do want to say this, the Black Lives Matter movement is not an anti-police movement. You hear people screaming, defund the police in the media all the time, but you have to ask yourself, like, what do they mean by defund the police? Do they not want to be protected? Of course they want to be protected, but there are a lot of other ways that we can go about mitigating crime, or mitigating, you know, the possibility of crime even happening in our cities, such as mental health or putting money into schools so we don't have to worry about you know, kids going down the wrong track as they grow. And another thing to consider is the Black Lives Matter movement, or the Blue Lives Matter movement has always been a counter protest to the Black Lives Matter movement. That's what it is. It is what it is, right?
All right. So I want to thank our guest today, Black Wall Street Times founder and editor Nehemiah Frank, a member of the Tulsa World Community Advisory Board, and Briana Shea, one of the artists responsible for the Black Lives Matter painting on Greenwood Avenue and one of the people responsible for repainting it after it was vandalized. Thank you. You've helped us appreciate a complicated and frankly emotional issue. Thank you to our viewers and to our sponsor, the George Kaiser Family Foundation. Please join us again next week for our next Tulsa World Let's Talk virtual town hall, when we'll be discussing another issue of high importance to Oklahomans. I'm Wayne Greene, editorial pages editor of the Tulsa World. Goodbye.